This meta-analysis is based on Lesson 2 from my month-long unit plan on the themes of biology. I used my curriculum map to plan backwards, implementing the three-stage process of understanding by design, which enabled me to devise a lesson plan that will accurately assess student understanding through clear learning goals and standards-based lesson planning. Using the essential questions highlighted here on my curriculum map, I was able to narrow down the big idea of my lesson and determine the skills my students will need to acquire this knowledge. Once I was able to identify learning goals, I researched standards that would help me to unbundle the content. Identifying appropriate standards helped me to narrow down lesson objectives and ultimately my focus question. Once I successfully identified my desired results, the next step was to determine acceptable evidence. While keeping my goals in mind, I began to select the performance tasks and assessments that would best allow students to demonstrate their understanding. After selecting my pre-assessments, formative assessments, and summative assessments, I was finally ready to begin planning my learning experiences and instruction. I began to think about the instructional strategies and learning activities that would be needed to achieve the results we need that can be reflected in assignments. I considered prerequisite skills and misconceptions, and reflected on how it might impact my planning. Ultimately, I used the I do, we do, you do method as a framework for scaffolding my instruction. This gradual release model will be successful in implementing a student-centered learning environment. My plan includes demonstration, prompt, and practice. My focus question is, what are the essential characteristics of living things? When the lesson is complete, students should be able to determine why things are classified as living or non-living, compare living and non-living things by identifying their characteristics, and list and define the 7 vital functions and provide examples of them. Some prerequisite skills they will need relate to science and language arts. They should know how to record data, use descriptive language to communicate thoughts, generalize ideas, and follow directions. Some students may not have the appropriate grade level reading comprehension skills or familiarity with more complex words in the English language. I will provide pictures illustrating the new vocabulary to assist them in identifying the action of the words as well as identical assignments in their native language. Students of all ages will have certain misconceptions when identifying something that is living and something that is not. Confusion can occur as many things may not appear to be living. I will use this image comparing a car and a tree to help them visualize what happens over time to living and non-living things. To assess prior knowledge about living and non-living things, I will display random pictures of objects, animals, and plants. I will then group students into small groups of 4 and pass out sets of pictures to each group. Students will be asked to think about a way to sort all the pictures into just 2 groups, things that are living and things that are not living. They will come up to the board and place their pictures in living or non-living columns on their groups section of the board. This will help them to visualize the living versus non-living concept using real-world examples and their prior knowledge. Once I have gotten an idea of where my students stand regarding living things, we will begin our Do Now. Students will be asked to take a look at our living things versus non-living things chart up on the board and brainstorm some ideas in their notebooks. After looking at the things on the living side of the chart, they will reflect and decide if they agree with everything placed there. Are these all living things? Why? What do they have in common? What does it take for them to stay alive? After students have brainstormed and considered the questions, we will talk about the difference between living and non-living things by reviewing their responses to the game. I will make a visible list on the board with the phrases they share out about living things. The purpose of this task is to use their prior knowledge to narrow down the necessities for life. Students will begin to understand that all living things need the same basic requirements in order to survive. After the Do Now, I will begin my mini lesson, the I Do section. In order to promote the acquisition of new vocabulary, I will scaffold the 7 vital functions by asking, can anyone tell me the meaning of the word vital? Where have you heard it before? Some students might recall having their vital signs taken at the doctor's office. We will stretch their knowledge and recognize that vital signs are clinical measurements, specifically pulse rate, temperature, respiration rate, and blood pressure, that indicate the state of a patient's essential body functions. Students will write down vital and essential in order to connect these words to stress the importance of the 7 vital functions. We will relate it to a life and death matter. Vital means absolutely necessary or important. Essential, not something you want, but something you need to survive. I will make the distinction between want and need here to help students remember that something is not considered living unless it exhibits all 7 functions. Using our pictures on the living versus non-living chart from the pre-assessment and the phrases provided by the students from the Do Now discussion, we will narrow down what it takes to be alive to the 7 vital functions. We will do this by circling the main characteristics that all the living items have in common. After gathering our 7 characteristics, using students' own language, I will provide the scientific term for the function. Students will write our 7 new vocabulary words next to the phrases they came up with on their own. This will allow them to put new words such as respiration or excretion into context and scaffold with simpler definitions in their own words. I will then select 5 new pictures of living and non-living things and use our 7 vital functions chart to determine if they in fact are living or not. Moving on to the We Do section of my lesson, I will use guiding questions to help my students cement the practice of identifying living things. Students will use our 7 functions to complete the same activity I have demonstrated using a new list of 5 things. They will be able to demonstrate their understanding of our definitions by applying them directly to the things in their environment. On a worksheet I provide, students will match the words in column A to their definitions in column B, demonstrating mastery of our 7 vital functions vocabulary. After students have shared their findings, we will move on to the You Do independent practice. They will be provided a list of actions such as having breakfast or a frog laying eggs to incorporate real-world examples of the 7 vital functions. Following this solo and silent activity, we will share out and address any misconceptions. We will revisit our focus question as review. What are the characteristics of living things? What are the 7 vital functions? After reviewing and reflecting, the exit task will allow students to demonstrate that they have identified the characteristics of living things and defined the 7 vital functions through real-world examples. Since we have established that a plant is a living thing during our lesson, in one sentence for each of the 7 vital functions, students will prove that a plant is alive. For homework, students will review notes from the day and think about things in their homes and environment that are living or non-living in terms of the 7 vital functions. I will email students a YouTube clip about the vital functions if they would like to continue reviewing at home. For my next steps in the short term, I will be building students up with practice using the 7 vital functions to provide evidence that something is or is not living. In the long term, we will use the scientific method to help us prove whether there is life or not, ultimately creating an experiment and writing a paper on determining living versus non-living things. In the future, we will also connect the cell theory to vital functions and build on levels of organization.